Now, calling in from the United States of America, we have our correspondent, Ms. Akano. She will be expanding on some breaking top development stories from the United States and Africa. Good evening to you, Ms. Akano. My first question to you, still on Afghanistan. How did Biden defend the United States' rapid withdrawal from Afghanistan in his recent speech?
Good evening, Metafriadoglo, and dear viewers. President Joe Biden defended his decision to withdraw troops from Afghanistan recently, as opponents questioned the chaotic conclusion to the country's longest conflict. I was not going to extend this forever war, and I was not going to extend a forever withdrawal, he declared in his first public address since the final American soldiers departed Afghanistan. He believes that it is past time to cease using the American military to rebuild other countries. I don't think enough people realize how much we have asked of the 1% of this country who put on the uniform, he added. The last United States flight out of Kabul departed a minute before midnight local time on Monday. The Taliban celebrated the exit with gunfire and fireworks, 20 years after American soldiers overthrew their rule. Biden also praised his administration evacuation operation in Afghanistan, calling them an amazing success. He dismissed criticism that his administration might have handled the evacuations better by starting the evacuations early in the summer or extending the deadline beyond the August 31st deadline in order to lingering longer would have meant increased conflict with the Taliban. Afghanistan war has proven costly, according to Brown University's Cost of War study. About 47,000 civilians and 2,400 U.S. servicemen died in the 20-year battle. According to the United Nations, civilian fatalities in Afghanistan reached record levels in the first half of 2021, making the final years of the fight among the bloodiest. According to a Reuters IPSOS survey issued on Monday, most Americans disapprove of Biden's handling of the U.S. exit from Afghanistan. Still, just 20% thought he deserved the most blame for the current state of the war.
Now, to Africans in the diaspora, what actions did the United Nations take to honor people of African descent recently?
The United Nations celebrated the first ever International Day of People of African Descent on Tuesday, recognizing the immense contributions of the African diaspora in every field of human endeavor. In his inaugural speech, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for a more profound commitment to achieving the promise of equality, justice, and dignity for everyone. It is a long overdue acknowledgement of the terrible injustice and systematic discrimination that people of African origin have faced for centuries and continue to face today, said the Secretary General. And it is an urgent call to action for everyone, everywhere, to commit to rooting out the evil of racism, he added. In the Americas alone, more than 200 million people identified as being of African descent. Millions more are located in areas other than Africa. They are among the poorest and most disadvantaged populations, according to the UN, whether they are descendants of victims of the transatlantic slave trade or recent migrants. The International Day was established by a resolution passed by the United Nations General Assembly in December last year. The goal was to encourage greater recognition and appreciation for the rich heritage, culture, and contribution of people of African descent to the development of countries, as well as to promote respect for persons of African descent, human rights, and basic freedom. This is our breaking news for tonight. Thank you for having me on Focal Point. Good night.
Well, thank you, Ms. Akano, for your contribution to this edition of Focal Point, and good night to you as well. Until next time. Now, a counter-terrorism expert in Germany said a serious...
Good evening, Metafriadoglo and dear viewers. The burden of evacuating and accommodating thousands of refugees from Afghanistan and the natural disasters, including Hurricane Ida, has left the White House with no option but to ask for a minimum of $30 billion helping funds to combat these immediate challenges. The administration official, while talking to the reporters, said that a $6.4 billion fund will be allocated for the resettlement of the refugees from Afghanistan, while $24 billion is needed for the recovery from the natural disasters. Out of those $24 billion, 14 will be allocated to recover from natural disasters and $10 billion from Hurricane Ida. President Joe Biden had a tough time during August as he was battling at two very challenging fronts at the same time. As the Taliban succeeded in wrapping up things faster than expected, the United States had no choice but to evacuate 124,000 Afghans and Americans from Afghanistan immediately. On the other hand, the country had to deal with the deadly fires in the western states, which wreaked havoc in New Jersey, New York, Mississippi, and Louisiana. The government is expected to bring 64,000 Afghans in the U.S. during this month and 30,000 more in the coming 12 months. The fund for Afghan refugees will be spent for different purposes, including transportation costs, public health screening, vaccination, humanitarian screening, helping the refugees to set up new homes for themselves, and any other things that they may need. The government official further stated that the amount requested for Ida recovery is just an initial estimate, and the administration is looking forward to collaborating with Congress to come up with a more specific number. We fully expect that Hurricane Ida will significantly increase the need for disaster response funding by at least $10 billion, the official said. And while it will take time to assess the damage and to arrive at a more specific estimate, we are committed to working with Congress to address those needs as well. The Democratic leaders are working day in and day out to create the draft of the multi-trillion-dollar bill as soon as possible. The plan is to move it in the House this week. The summary of the legislative test has revealed that the bill will focus especially on paid leaves for at least 12 weeks, along with an increase in the horizon of the Medicare benefits, such as the inclusion of hearing, vision, and dental treatment. Regarding the challenging deadline, one of the Democrats said that we are at a place where the rubber is hitting the road in terms of shaping the policy and fine-tuning everything and really racing toward those deadlines. We are obviously setting an ambitious timeline, but we are moving forward to meet it. The team of the Democrats is working in coordination with the lawmakers in order to avoid any sort of hindrance that may come after they move the bill in the House. The Democrats are of the view that they want to craft the bill in a way that they could get it passed in both houses. The debate on the total volume of the bill is going around. Some Democrats are of the view that $3.5 trillion is too much, while others are hopeful that it will get passed by the House. The bill is supposed to cover all the shortcomings in the prior medical allowances and wants to ensure maximum relief to the ones who need it the most. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois told reporters Tuesday that she believes all 50 Democratic voting members, including Manchin, will ultimately come together. I don't have real concern. I think Joe is doing what Joe needs to do for himself, for his state, and you are going to see other senators probably do some of this as well, she said. I think at the end of the day, there'll be 50 votes, but we believe we are going through a very healthy, loud family discussion about it. This is our breaking news for tonight. Thank you for having me on Focal Point. Good night. Good evening, Metafriadoglo and dear viewers. President Joe Biden has requested to allocate $400 billion for taking care of the disabled and elderly. However, he hasn't got much support because the Democrats have just agreed to give him less than half of what Biden has demanded.
This surely has been a tricky and challenging phase for lawmakers. On the other hand, Democrats are trying hard to put together a whopping $3.5 trillion spending and tax package to establish a balance between the expensive wish list of progressive and the president with moderate's desire to keep the price tag as low as possible. However, there are some Democrats determined to get $400 billion for ElderCare funds. Senate negotiators are holding negotiation talks with those Democrats who have shown their dissent related to the $400 billion figure. These senators include Senator Kristen Sinema of Arizona and Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. On this Thursday, a detail of a specific portion of the bill was issued by the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which says that only $190 billion have been allocated to expand Medicaid to assist the disabled and elderly in their homes. This amount is way lesser than the amount proposed by President Joe Biden. In fact, this amount is even lower than what $250 billion Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania requested. Right now, due to insufficient resources, states are unable to cater to those over 80,000 people who are on waiting lists to get home-based care assistance under Medicaid. The goal is to take care of the waiting list and help more people with home-based care. This is our breaking news for tonight. Thank you for having me on Focal Point. Good night. The tragic event of 9/11 took the lives of more than 3,000 people 20 years ago. It was a bright morning when planes hit the World Trade Center, Pentagon, in Pennsylvania. The catastrophe which the event caused is still afresh in the minds of those who lost their loved ones. Multiple terrorists and historians have argued that America lost its pride in being invincible and has never been able to retain its position. Michael J. Allen, a professor of American history at Northwestern University, said in this regard that the United States is a far less confident and optimistic nation now than it was in September 2001, which marked the end of a decade of technology-fueled economic growth, foreign policy dominance, and presidential centrism. But it is also a more diverse nation with a more clear-eyed sense of the serious challenges Americans face and a more realistic sense of the dangers and limits of American power. On that note, Sally Regenhard, an American activist and the mother of a victim Christian of the 9/11 attack, said, "The unfinished business of 9/11 is the fact that over 1,100 people remain missing and unidentified. Despite all the impacts, the current U.S. administration feels itself to take the responsibility to console people and help reinvigorate national unity. Not only Biden planned to visit all the places which were attacked, but he also issued statements that said it's so hard, whether it is the first year or the 20th. Children have grown up without parents, and parents have suffered without children. He also appreciates the notion of unity in a nation, on which he said that we also saw something all too rare, a true sense of national unity. Good evening, Metafriadoglo and dear viewers. The COVID-19 epidemic has proven to be the most challenging time the world has faced since World War II, said the UN Secretary General on Tuesday. Antonio Guterres, while handing over the gavel to the next Assembly President, praised his predecessor. Throughout this difficult period, we have all been privileged to rely on the leadership of His Excellency President Volkan Bozkır. The UN Secretary General thanked the outgoing Turkish diplomat and politician for emphasizing a sustainable recovery based on the 2030 agenda, as well as assisting nations and people in rebuilding systems shattered by the pandemic. Mr. Guterres stated that the Assembly has attempted to strengthen health system, supplied COVID-19 testing, treatment, equipment, and contribute to the most extensive immunization campaign in history under Mr. Bozkır's leadership. In short, under President Bozkır's stewardship, this Assembly has proven time and again the value of multilateralism and a rules-based international system, said the Secretary General. Outgoing President Bozkır delivered a passionate speech before concluding the 75th Assembly's last meeting that his tenure took place during a stormy, historic, transformative, unequal, challenging, and groundbreaking year. From the beginning of my presidency, we knew that COVID-19 would dominate our agenda. However, I can now say that it has reinforced our belief in a more effective and responsive UN, he added. Abdullah Shahid of the Maldives, the newly sworn-in General Assembly President, then began the new 76th session, saying that his country's flag is flying at the highest peak today. Mr. Guterres also emphasized the need of recommitting to the UN's ideals of human rights, helping the most vulnerable, and promoting peace throughout dialogue and solidarity. Let us keep this better world in mind every day for the next year. Let us live and breathe our values in this assembly and throughout our work. He said, adding, the entire Secretariat is at your disposal. This is our breaking news for tonight. Thank you for having me on Focal Point. Good night.
Good evening, Metafriadoglo and dear viewers. Pentagon authorities confirmed on Friday that a drone attack targeting militants in Afghanistan on August 29th killed innocent civilians, including children. We now assess it is unlikely that the vehicle and those who died were associated with ISIS. General Kenneth McKenzie, the head of U.S. Central Command, said it was a mistake. He said he is fully responsible for this strike and the tragic outcome. I offer my profound condolences to the family and friends of those who were killed. The strike was ordered in response to last month's devastating suicide bombing near Kabul airport, killing 13 U.S. military personnel and Afghan civilians. It was initially thought to have averted another attack. After allegations that the drone's Hellfire missile killed as many as 10 civilians and did not prevent a terror act. As U.S. authorities first claimed, Central Command launched a formal investigation called a 15-6. According to relatives, the 10 dead were all members of the same extended family, including the 7 kids. Some of the children were as young as 2 and 3 years old. President Joe Biden initially hailed the strike as a success, suggesting that the U.S. could conduct over-the-horizon strikes from outside of Afghanistan. We have already demonstrated the capability in the previous week. We launched a remote strike on ISIS only days after they murdered 13 of our military men and dozens of innocent Afghans, he said. President Joe Biden's recent agreement to assist Australia in launching nuclear-powered submarines may have reinforced one alliance in an effort to confront China. However, for France, which withdrew its ambassadors to the United States and Australia on Friday, the action may have jeopardized what little confidence had been established after 4 years under previous President Donald Trump, experts said. As Biden welcomed the new AUKUS contract with Australia and the United Kingdom on Thursday, French officials expressed outrage over the arrangement, which effectively ended that country's 2016 agreement to construct submarines for Australia. As the request of the President of the Republic, I am recalling to Paris without delay our ambassadors to the United States and Australia for consultations. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian expressed his disappointment in a statement. This exceptional decision is justified by the exceptional gravity of the announcement made on the 15th of September by Australia and the United States. President Joe Biden launched the Security Alliance with Australia and the United Kingdom on Wednesday. It will empower Australia to build nuclear power submarines for the first time, utilizing technology that the United States had previously exclusively shared with the United Kingdom. Nuclear submarines have more stealth, speed, and range than regular submarines, and only a few countries, notably China and Russia, have nuclear submarines. According to Le Drian, the new agreement was an affront to France's agreement with Australia. A visibly enraged French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian described the deal as a stab in the back. He added, "We built a relationship of trust with Australia, and this trust was betrayed. This is not done between allies." This is our breaking news for tonight. Thank you for having me on Focal Point. Good night.
We have our correspondent, Ms. Akano. She will be expanding on some breaking top developing stories coming in from the United States of America. Good evening to you, Ms. Akano.
Good evening, Métaphore de Gloire and dear viewers. In his first address to the annual meeting of world leaders at the United Nations on Tuesday, U.S. President Joseph Biden called for a new age of global solidarity in the face of the COVID-19, climate change, and insecurity challenges. To put it simply, we are at a historic crossroads, he said. We must collaborate like never before. Mr. Biden informed UN General Assembly leaders that the U.S. wants to work with allies to help lead the world toward a more peaceful and prosperous future for all, highlighting that governments must continue to coordinate to deliver equal prosperity, peace, and security for all. He described the endeavor as being as crucial and essential now as it was 76 years ago. President Biden reaffirmed his decision to withdraw U.S. soldiers from Afghanistan, emphasizing that this marks the beginning of a new era of intense American diplomacy. He added that the use of force should be our instrument of last resort, not our first, and that priority should be shifted away from 2 decades of conflicts and toward newly emerging threats. The president lamented the 4.5 million COVID-related deaths globally, referring to each as an individual heartbreak, and emphasized the need to act immediately to get shots and arms as soon as possible and increase access to oxygen, testing, and treatments to save lives throughout the world. Without criticizing his predecessor, President emphasized that his administration has turned away from an America First approach and toward one of multilateralism. He also commented on a new U.S. target under the Paris Agreement to decrease greenhouse gas emissions to 50% below 2005 levels by 2030, as well as expenditures under consideration with Congress, including greenhouse infrastructure and electric vehicles. He stated that the U.S. will lead with our principles and power to stand up for allies and friends. And as the U.S. states attempts to galvanize the world to action, Mr. Biden promised we will lead not only with the example of our power, but God willing, the power of our example.
Why has Donald Trump gone ahead to sue his niece and the New York Times? What does the former president stand to gain from this?
Former President Donald Trump filed a $100 million lawsuit on Tuesday against his own niece, Mary Trump, and the New York Times, saying they conspired to acquire his tax records for the paper's Pulitzer-winning article on his undisclosed finances. According to the suit, Mary Trump and 3-time journalists Russell Brutner, David Barstow, and Susan Gregg were involved in an insidious plot and an extensive crusade to acquire Trump's taxes. According to the lawsuit, the defendants engaged in an insidious plot to obtain confidential and highly sensitive documents, which they exploited for their own benefit and utilized to legitimize their publicized work falsely. Gregg, Barstow, and Brutner were awarded the Pulitzer Prize for explanatory reporting in 2019 for their series of pieces gave the public an unparalleled insight at Trump's finances. Mary has said that she sent Trump's tax return to the Times in her best-selling 2020 book about her uncle, Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Men, as well as in media appearances, which the lawsuit mentioned. In the book, Trump's brother Fred Jr.'s daughter presents an unauthoritative image of Donald J. Trump and the toxic family that made him. Mary Trump described her uncle as desperate in a statement. "I believe he is a loser who will throw whatever he can against the wall. It is a sign of desperation. The walls are closing in on Trump, and he is throwing whatever he thinks will stick against them," she added. As is always the case with Donald, he will attempt to change the subject. The New York Times said in a statement that they intend to fight the case. The lawsuit says that Mary Trump breached a confidentiality agreement that prevented her from publicly disclosing information of the family's finance under the terms of Fred Trump Sr. estate settlement. This is our breaking news for tonight. Thank you for having me on Focal Point. Good night.
Well, thank you, Ms. Akano, for expounding to our viewers today's breaking stories coming in from the United States. Good night to you, and catch you same time on Monday next week. Now, coming up are the figures of COVID-19 affected cases, deaths, recoveries in some West African countries.